Kubla Cubed offers powerful export options, and to access this you go to File, then Export, and you click on CAD Data. So now you have this project preview that displays all these different option groups which correlate to different layers in the export. I will go through them one by one. The first one is Phases, and you can select which phases you export to CAD. By default, existing and the selected phase is exported, but you can select others as well. If you had a multi-phase project, you could export all of it to CAD at once if you wanted to, and it would be separated into different layers so that it would be more manageable. You can then choose whether you include the input data that you used for defining your surfaces, for example, the contour lines for defining features, or the boundaries for defining platforms and slopes. If you need that, then make sure this box is ticked. Here, you click if you want to include or not to include the triangulation. So if I turn this off, you can see that the triangulation disappears. And you can choose whether or not you want to shade the surface. Now, if you're using blended shading, it won't actually export blended shading. The CAD format, as you can see, does not support it, so I have to switch this fading shim to discrete in order to export shaded surfaces. In certain occasions, you do not want this ground in the tin, you just want the area of disturbance, so you click here if you want to export the disturbance area only. So you export tins without the areas that aren't included in the cut and fill. That might be if you were doing a cut and fill comparison, you would want it to export the existing and then another proposed. But you wouldn't want your surrounding existing in your proposed surface for that operation. Now let's move on to these two groups, the contour lines and the gridded data. You can generate contour lines from your tins, and you can also generate gridded data from your tins. This can be useful, for example, where the gridded points can be imported into different programs that don't support tins. Same goes for contour lines. They're just good for doing various visualizations of your terrain. So the options here are quite self-explanatory. You've got the starting contour line and the contour line interval. And then here, the option to include or not to include contour labels. You generate gridded data, and you've got labels, and you have an origin point and a grid interval. So you can play around with this. And as you change it, it will update the preview and you can see the sort of density of the grid that you're exporting. So finally, like the earthworks lines, this yellow line here is around the outline, which you can include. You can see that if I turn off the shading, you can see the cut and fill lines that you can also export, and that can be useful in machine control situation. And the incline lines are the sort of dashes that are used to mark a side slope butters in Kubla Cubed. So we've got our options selected here, and when we're ready to export, we will click OK. And I will save this on my desktop. And now the file is automatically open in our CAD program. And we can just have a look now at how it is laid, so it correlates quite nicely with that window. So I go into the Layer Manager, and you will see that it starts with this face, all this, And for each group of options, there is a layer with that in brackets. Now I will hide all of them so I can take a look at each one in turn. So I keep the generated contour lines, and that's quite useful export for visualizing their surfaces as contour lines, and you can see the labels are being included here. Here's the label. Now I go to Layer Manager again, and I will turn on the gridded data. And this can be very useful because you could create a PDF for this and take it to the site. And especially if you have overlaid it against your site plan, you could see in detailed view where the cut and fill is and how deep it was on a printed plan. You can see that cut points are in red and the fill points are in blue. And it's also useful because the gridded data can be imported into other programs like Autodesk Revit that don't have it in import. High density gridded data would be used in that case. So now I will go to the next one, which is, I better go to the Layer Manager, which is Input Data. So this is the contour lines that we use to define the feature surface, and it also has the boundary line, the outline that we used. You could use this to have it imported back into Kubla Cubed if you need it. So I go to Layer Manager again, and you can see that now we have the triangulation, and finally we have the earthworks lines. So you can see clearly the cut and fill lines from the mesh here. I will make it more clear. Here are the cut and fill lines. And this is the triangulation. So this was an overview of the CAD export options in Kubla Cubed. Thank you for watching.